Let's get started. Yeah, so I started the day today to this piece in Semaphore, written by this Ben Smith guy. I mean, I this is like one of these things where I'm actually kind of close to some of these personalities in my network in Silicon Valley, and I may have even been in some of these various Telegram and Signal chat rooms myself personally over the past few years. I left some of these groups very unceremoniously a few months ago. Um, that did in fact have some of these figures in the chat, and I have thoughts about that. How do you turn this light on? It's very dark in here. You guys see me? Desk lamp. How do you turn this on? There we go. There we go. There we go. Um, maybe I should talk about this. I don't know. I mean, I've talked about this, I guess, a little bit. It's in my it's on my about page, and I've written a few pieces about like my whole sort of like exit from Silicon Valley and then into this sort of like full-time writer philosopher thing that I'm doing now. Whatever it is that I'm doing now. This. Um, One of the things that I observed over 10 years in Silicon Valley. And I, of course, documented some of these observations and some of my more tentpole pieces, like, The Plot Against America, which some of you may have read. It's like the most read piece on my Substack by far, and has gone viral. It's been translated into various languages. It was like republished in The Unpopulist. It's been republished with authorization from me and um, in other publications as well. Um, the truth is that while that was a well researched piece, and I certainly did a lot of research to write that piece. What is it now, like 3 or 4 months ago, and I wrote that piece, which took the better part of 5 days to write the whole piece. I wasn't just writing it. I wasn't just. It wasn't like I just like sat down on Google and started researching this stuff. I mean, I was an observer to the ideological drift of some of these people up front. Like, so it was a piece that was, in some sense, like written as much from personal experience as it was written from the perspective of like my research and my research, and I didn't want to write a piece of personal anecdotes of things that could be like challenged, things that could be said to be like hearsay. So I sort of put my own personal experiences aside with like, and I will talk about some of these things. I mean, I got to be kind of like careful because like, things legal realities are the way they are, and there's non-disclosure agreements, and it's like it's a shitty situation for me actually, like in general. Not suggesting that like any of the NDAs I signed were untoward. They're normal. They're just normal things that you sign when you when you work in companies. Um, but they, uh, and so I'm not suggesting that I was ever forced to sign an NDA to shut up. That's not the case. That's no one has ever tried to shut me up. And so, like, just to be clear, like I mean, I want to. While I am critiquing people in Silicon Valley, I also don't want to like overstate my case about like how I've been treated or anything. The truth is that a lot of the figures that I'm criticizing, I was adjacent to. I wasn't always necessarily working with them. I might have met these people through business dealings. I may have met them um, through, um, I may have met them through social gatherings, like through networks and stuff. So I wouldn't represent to the world that that I've ever been sort of threatened, and someone that anyone ever tried to like force me to sign an NDA. That's not true. But I mean, at the same time, as you sort of like parse through these things and think about the stories that you might tell, you also have to think about the fact that like you also lived in a world where you probably signed 150 NDAs along the way, um, uh, and so one must be careful. And so when I wrote the plot against America, I chose to use open source information. I knew where to go looking because I knew what I was looking for, and I knew that that would be a more defensible and robust angle. But the truth is, like, I do know some of these people directly and indirectly, um, that I would suggest are, acting contra the interests of the United States. So that is that's just like, I don't know. I've hinted at that being the case, and I'm saying it explicitly now that that's where I am personally. And here's what I will say on that. I mean, it was very disturbing to see people, in some cases close to me, drift from a sort of idealistic, sort of utopian, libertarianish sort of like technology can save the world, sort of utopian vision for Silicon Valley, to this sort of dark, sort of like this government is needs to be overthrown type, type thinking, or if not overthrown, at least like like forced into collapse, right? This accelerationist notion, and I know plenty of people like who believe this and argued with me about it. There are in my mind, like I think there are certain figures that I can think of right now that I sat and had, I don't know, like looking back on it, like, I mean, I think batshit insane views. It's pretty common when you're like, let's like talk specifically about Bitcoin and crypto. Let's just talk about this. Like, this is like a big piece of the puzzle. Um, in my sort of like disapprobation for these people. Um, Now, I want to say this, like, by the way, like, all Bitcoin and crypto people are not evil. This is not the case. Like, I know plenty of Bitcoin and crypto people that are, they read notes from the circus and they agree with almost everything I say. I just want to, and I have friends that still work in the industry and they're good people, and like, but a lot of the people in Bitcoin and crypto would agree with me on what I'm about to say. That um, these these people are, well, not these people, but this industry, this crypto Bitcoin industry is it's teeming with fascists. Like, it just is, like, fascists, feudalists, accelerationists, whatever you want to call them. We can talk about like the distinctions between them, and there are all different types. But I mean, it's not uncommon to go to like a crypto conference or a Bitcoin conference and hear someone express accelerationist views. So what is accelerationism? Um, it's the belief that the system's going to collapse anyways. There's nothing we can do. That the collapse of, say, in the case of Bitcoin, like Bitcoin maximalists or these hyper Bitcoinization people would state that like the US dollar is just bound to collapse. They would argue it's a Ponzi scheme. The Federal Reserve has increase the monetary supply to such a level that it simply like it's just, it's in a precarious place, that eventually this um all of these this excess money that, well, they describe it as excess money on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve and the member banks of the Federal Reserve System are essential, will eventually like they will eventually like translate into hyperinflation and the collapse of the US dollar. And they kind of take the position that this was inevitable, that the second that, in 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window, and we had sort of the end of the Bretton Woods consensus, that this was essentially ordained at this point, that the hyperinflation and collapse of the US dollar was bound to happen. they impute this to be the case through usually through like this reasoning of monetary theory based in Austrian economics, the theories of Ludwig von Mises um, and Murray Rothbard, uh, and various other figures in that sort of movement. And of course, Bitcoin has sort of spawned its own sort of like Austrian economists. I've criticized Saifedean, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, as one of these figures as well. And I mean, they basically just believe that the U.S. dollar is destined to fail and there's nothing anyone can do about it. So why not just quicken its demise? And um, they kind of think it's like kind of like putting a suffering dog out of its misery. That's kind of like how they sort of think about it. This sort of accelerationist view. Let's just crash the system now. Let's do the thing, that the Fight Club thing, right? If you've seen that movie, you have people like, you literally have CEOs and like, crypto millionaires that think this and will say this. Like I've been at dinners and conferences with them, and I've argued with them about this. I was pretty consistently someone who thought that these views were fucking crazy. Like, what are you talking about? Like crashing the U.S. dollar will bring about a massive depression. People will die. Children will starve. Like this is bad. Do not do this. But they, I guess I'll just say it. Like, I mean, these aren't good people. They're not good people. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, that's why they don't seem to care about the suffering that they seek to met out in this accelerationist fantasy. That's like, I mean, they also think that they are going to be the masters of this new world, right? Because they think they have, you know they basically have early access to the new money that will replace the old money that will collapse when government issued currency goes away. Um, I mean, so like, just to be clear, like, I mean, they expect to get rich off your pain. Like, I mean, that's just like, I mean, that, like, I mean, that's just like where they are, right? And they would take issue with this. Like they'd be like, no, like they'd be like, no, like you can't say this. It was going to collapse anyways. Like, like we want everyone to buy Bitcoin and crypto. I mean, they would completely bristle at my characterization here, but I can tell you, I mean, some of these people are just like the most cynical fucks in the world. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, they don't care. They don't care what happens. I mean, like to you, like I just don't believe that. Um, I mean, I do. I mean, I care what happens to you, which is why I kind of lit my career on fire to come and tell you guys about all of this. Um, which isn't good for me. It's not good for my financial position, just to be clear. I mean, I would, I could be making a lot more money right now if I had just kept my head down and shut up about all of this. I mean, that is just a fact of life. So I mean, that's how these people like view the world. No, I mean, accelerationists are found outside of crypto too. We should take note of this. It's like there's all these various different groups, but I mean, crypto really has been, I think, a really powerful nexus. And as some of you may know, it was also the largest source of political funding in the U.S. presidential campaign in 2024. The single largest source of political fundraising came from the crypto lobby. And we should also just mention that like most of crypto is fraud. It's just fraud in most cases. There's like some people trying to do legitimate things, and we can like debate whether or not those are like viable projects, like whether or not they'll find product market fit. I mean, there are honest people trying to do honest things, but the majority of it is fraud. I mean, it just is. Um, and I mean, like, and like that, and like, and so I mean, like, the Trump coin is fraud. Like everyone knows this, right? Like this is a fraud. I mean, like, there's no it makes there's no economic utility to this arrangement that people have come up with. I mean, actually, only there is an economic utility. It's a way to bribe Trump. I mean, it's like that's what it is. And he's rolled out the red carpet of bribery in the form of this Trump coin. Um, And most, most of the crypto industry is like this. Um, I mean, we can talk about, I guess, how they, I already know like all the counter arguments to everything I'm saying. So for instance, like, if one of them were here, they would point back to the Federal Reserve and all the money printing. They would point to, there's all this, all the I mean some of the stuff they say is true. This is like I mean I wrote a piece on this, I don't know like how long ago it was, the piece is called Not Even Wrong. You should read that piece because it really does kind of like demonstrate, because I'm honestly like a lot of the critiques that crypto people have of the payment system and the unfairness of the banking system are actually critiques I share. um I've seen like firsthand, when I was working in my previous job, how bad regulation has the unintended effect of keeping the economically downtrodden and the poor out of the banking system. Like I'll give you an example of this. It's actually really insane. It's bad. This is an example of bad regulation causing bad outcomes. Um, like there's this like there's banking regulations around like overdraft fees in banks, for example. And what the government basically says is you're allowed to charge a flat fee on an overdraft for 30 days, without any daily interest accumulation. It's a federal, it's a banking reg. It's like I can't remember if it's like Reg Z or what, I don't remember what the fuck it is, but it's a reg. And I actually think it's a really bad reg because a lot of banks would just like charge like daily interest on overdraft, which would be cheaper than a $35 fee. Because if the bank has said that you have, if you have to provide an overdraft loan by law for a fixed fee for 30 days before accumulating interest, you're just going to set a high fee. Like so the banks are actually in this case incentivized by consumer protection regulation to set a high overdraft fee. I mean, that's actually true. Like I'll actually take the bank's side on this. It's an example of a terrible regulation, that I don't that thing actually helps consumers and I actually think hurts poor people. Um, and so crypto people will like, draw that out, right? As a critique. And I would agree with that critique, but I wouldn't, I don't necessarily think that like I don't get from that to like thinking that we should like collapse the US dollar or the US banking system. That's insane. Let's fix the regulation. Um, I mean that I mean so there's all these like, various like angles on which to, genuinely critique, right? I mean, there are critique. I mean, I think there are issues in our monetary system, right? I mean, it is true that like, primary market borrowers in the financial system, get access to pre-inflationary money, right? And there's like things you can do with that. You can front run the Federal Reserve, and there's money that can be extracted. I mean, some economists have estimated that like some of these investment banks are able to like basically, materialize free billions of dollars out of thin air as a result of this, right? Which make it. I mean, it's true. Like making when you put money in the economy, it becomes like inflationary, and if you can sort of be part of that money flow and take advantage of differences and real interest rates and the coupon rate that you get from the Federal Reserve, yeah, you can arbitrage that shit and you can create free money. And primary market brokers do this, and it's a thing, right? And you can ask the question of like, is that fair? Like, or but you could try to target regulations at that. You could try to tax that back, right, and redistribute that, right? Effect. So I think that like in many cases that like this sort of like all or nothing, crypto approach is just like ethically and morally bankrupt. It suggests that there's like a false choice between, getting, the US dollar and replacing it with something like a supposedly political neutral currency like Bitcoin. Um I mean, that doesn't mean that these technologies can't find a place in the economy. I think some of them will. But I mean, like this idea that they serve as sort of a full replacement for, our economic system is just nonsense. Um, and and it completely like misunderstands, this. I mean, the basic like economic realities. Another economic like insane view that many people in this world like sort of cling to, which is it's just insane. Like we know it's wrong. It's wrong. It's a wrong view. It's been empirically proven wrong. Like we can talk about the experience of Japan and their stagflation and like their last 10 years, and we can kind of like look at these things and see that like that's like these things don't work the way that the Austrian monetary theorists say that they do. Like it's just proven wrong. I mean, look, I mean, the Austrians were saying that the TARP bailouts in 2009 were going to collapse the US currency. Like Ron Paul was like standing up in the fucking Senate like every day saying that like the dollar was like years away from collapse, and that never happened. Like we're what? Like we're like we're like over a decade removed from that now, and that never happened. And so I mean, I don't know what that says about the veracity of these theorists, but um um I mean the general view that they hold is this idea that an ideal money is a money that has fixed supply. Um, so in the Bitcoin world, the protocol has been sort of preset to have 21 million Bitcoins and only 21 million Bitcoins ever in, and there's a um uh there's a sort of a preset schedule for how the new bitcoins are distributed. This happens through mining of blocks, and there's this like difficulty readjustment that happens to basically make the timing kind of generally consistent across time. I mean, it's interesting. It's like technically fascinating. It's actually fun to talk about. It's an ingenious design, really. But an ingenious design doesn't necessarily mean it solves all the world's problems, and it certainly doesn't in this case. So one of the things that in economics that a lot of these like sound money theorists in Bitcoin and in other parts of crypto like don't deal with, right, is something that they're gonna like immediately they'll immediately cast me as like a socialist or a leftist by invoking John Maynard Keynes right now, but I'm going to invoke John Maynard Keynes right now because he knew what he was fucking talking about on this issue, and he's been proven right empirically, which has to do with this idea of like a liquidity trap in a market, right? And a demand and demand destruction uh, that occurs, right, in a period of falling prices. So. Um, so like what Keynes understood is that when prices start going down, right, in an economy, um, something actually unexpected happens. If people expect if people expect eggs to be cheaper next week than they are this week, they will tend to try and put off their purchases. If they expect that the cost of goods is going to decline, like on average, like 5, 6, 7% a year, like Bitcoiners claim they should, based on whatever like mechanism they're using, like productivity gains from technology, like whatever, like just from like holding money. Well, basically, what that does is, like in economic terms, is it says, well, like, look, I mean, like, you're going to get 5 to 6% free money every year, just not by spending it. Well, what does that do? Well, it has several effects. It means people are incentivized to delay spending. Well, if they delay spending, that will reduce capital investment. But it's even worse because capital investment is more expensive because the risk-free rate is 5 to 6%. Like you can make money by doing nothing at 5 to 6%. So what Keynes like recognizes this is actually a paradox. It actually like this doesn't work. It actually leads to what he described as a demand destruction spiral. It starts with like consumers put off spending because they want their money to grow and they want prices to fall, and because that happens, there's less orders in factories, so they lay off workers. Capital investment is more expensive because borrowing costs are very, very high because of this. So interest rates go really, really high, and this just like leads to a depression. Like all of the individual transaction incentives in the system actually like cause everyone to just like stop producing and stop consuming, and you get the Great Depression. And Keynes basically argued that, like, and obviously, Ben Bernanke, argued this in the in the financial crisis was like, well, if this happens, like what you do is you print a lot of money and you prevent this from you prevent prices from collapsing. You do this. You just this is what the this is where the drop money from helicopters statement that Ben Bernanke was talking about comes from. He was talking about this. He was talking about avoiding Keynes' demand destruction spiral. Because once people start thinking that their money will be worth more tomorrow, prices will go down, like business risk taking disappears, business investment collapses, employees get laid off, and you enter you enter like a sort of like an uncontrolled economic spiral. And Austrian economists and like Austrian Bitcoiners will claim that this is like not fucking true. They'll claim that there's like another equilibrium. They'll talk a lot about time preference, and they'll talk, and they'll talk about like living like a low time preference lifestyle and all these crazy fucking things they say. Um, but they like don't seem to like pay any attention to the fact that like economies of scale matter, right, in society. Like they really do, right? Like for your quality of life. If they had their way, you would get what Keynes might describe as a um what I'm trying to, my words not coming to me, but um a well, I can't remember the word he used, but uh economy of thrift is the word that I think Keynes used to describe it. You get an economy of thrift where everyone's just trying to like do everything as cheaply as possible. That's not good. Like that's not good. That's not how you get a growing economy. That's how you get a very stagnant economy. And so I mean that's the world that we would expect to get. And so yeah, I mean it's crazy. Like we don't want our money to act that way. We've done this before. Like we have, and they'll put they and it's also crazy too because they'll say, well, we were on the gold standard in the 19th century and everything was better then. You hear this too as well, right? In this like, age of like I mean, the you could look at how many financial crises there were in the United States in the 19th century. I think there was like seven in that century, like seven, like 2008 financial crises, like bank panics and shit like that. I mean, it was an unstable banking system under the gold standard, but they will then claim that that was all because of like government interference and like it's like it's nuts. It's nutty, it's nutty. Like 99% of economists think this is nutty, and they will argue that 99% of economists have been indoctrinated by fiat. That's what they'll say. Anyways, so that's what they believe. Anyways, let's talk about the main thing I was going to talk about, which is these signal chats. um so I mean, look, I think like, look, I mean, I think that we I'm trying to practice this. I'm trying to practice this right now with you. I'm trying to practice it on Substack. I'm trying to practice it like, just by kind of being out there and sort of being like a public voice. I think that for in a functioning democracy, debates about our future, about about the laws that we're going to make, about how we run our economy, about our values, our foreign policy, all these things are debates that should happen in public. we're we're an experiment in self-government in America, and if we're going to have informed voters, then we owe it. I mean, if I like I'm trying to influence things, right? Obviously, I'm writing about it. I'm trying to influence everyone who's listening to me. Why wouldn't I? I think I'm right about everything. No, I'm not. I'm more modest than that, but I'm joking. I don't actually think I'm right about everything, but I think I'm right about a lot of things. I'd be insane if I thought I was wrong about everything. Why would I speak at all? But what I would say is that we owe it like to civil society, right? Like our sense of like civic republicanism, to try and have these debates in public and to invite public participation. And so this whole kind of culture of like governing the country in signal chats and coming up with strategies on how to pull the wool over everyone's eyes. I mean, that's just these are just like wannabe tyrants. Like they want to rule you. Like they don't want to include you in their decision making. I mean, that's what this says. Like it's very dark. I mean, Look, I mean, these people knew that Donald Trump tried to overthrow the election in 2020. I mean, David Sachs. I mean, go back and see what David Sachs said in like in 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 the fall of 2020, or Mark Andreessen, or these motherfuckers know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They know that Donald Trump tried to overturn the election. They just saw an opportunity. They saw him as a convenient battering ram to kind of go in through the back door and try to turn this country into an oligarchy. And how do you turn this country into an oligarchy? It was very simple. All you need to do is destroy the government, and have these oligarchs and these companies step in to provide the services the government can't or won't provide anymore. That's their goal. That's like the purpose of Doge. That's like why they're doing it. They want to disable the U.S. state. That's what they want to do. Um, they think about the U.S. as they want to think about the world as economic zones. They don't really they don't really care about. I mean, they really don't care about any of the stuff I talk about. Like when I talk about how much I love this country and love the history of this country, um, how the people of this country and the dream of pursuing a more perfect union. Like I believe these things. Like I cry about these things. I get teary eyed about it. I love it. But these people think they think it's all bullshit. They think it's all nonsense rhetorical flourish. You're like, they'll be like, oh, have you heard of the iron law of oligarchy from the Italian school? Well, it's like, why? Yes, I have. I mean, that's fascism. I mean, that's like, that's how these people like view the world. The iron law of oligarchy, by the way, is this argument that all democracies are oligarchies, and the democracy is just performative. That votes never matter. I mean, if votes don't matter, then why is all this happening? It certainly matters that people voted for Donald Trump. Things would be different if Kamala Harris won. I think that that's empirically true. But they argue essentially that basically, oligarchs and corporations control everything anyways. All democracies are essentially just for show, and they argue that we need to just like fucking just like drop the pretense, get a king, and just be ruled by oligarchs. um and they believe that they believe they're benevolent. They believe they're gonna like basically like Elon thinks he's gonna create the human star empire, and live forever, and like I mean they're full of themselves, like they are. I mean they do in many cases believe their own bullshit. Not all of them. Some of them are just like Machiavellian, like opportunists, like really evil fucks, like really, that have way too much money and way too much time on their hands. So I mean, like that's just like true. And like I said, I know some of these people. I speak from experience. So um that's my that's like kind of like my main take on these on this. I think that it's I mean it's kind of shocking. It's shocking too, right? I mean, because like some of I mean I mean I I'm just gonna come out and say it. I mean, like the fact that like Mark Cuban was in some of these chats. I mean, I've spoken to Mark a few times. Quite surprised he hasn't mentioned this, because he clearly knew a lot more about these neo-reactionary motherfuckers than he's let on, based on the fact that he's been exposed to have been in some of these chats. I don't know what to make of that, Mark. Love to talk to you about it. But I mean, like that. I knew about it because I saw about it, but I was writing about it. I was trying to fucking tell the world about it. The whole time I started trying to tell the world about this over a year ago when I started writing on my Medium blog. Yeah, I mean, I will say that like and you can imagine that I've lost a lot of relationships. That there's a lot of people who used to be friends who won't talk to me anymore. um I mean, they think I'm just like they think I'm clueless now. They think they think I'm alarmist, or they think I'm like at least one of them thinks I'm working for the CIA. Based on, um, I'm not working for the CIA. I promise you that. But I mean, like that's kind of like their they, they're lost in this ideology, um, where they've convinced themselves, that, this republic that was formed, um, I guess technically wasn't really formed until, I mean, it wasn't 1776 was the Declaration of Independence. Technically, the republic really formed in 1787 when the actual republic constitution was adopted. So we've had a republic since 1787. Um, and I mean, they want to end it. They think it's a failed experiment. I mean, and JD Vance has said this publicly. I mean, I mean, you can go and read my Plot Against America piece, or go and read, the Vanity Fair piece that I referenced there, the piece, the brilliant piece by Pogue. Um, I mean, Vance has very explicitly said that the Republican project, he refers to us living in the late Republican period. He's very explicit about the fact that he thinks that the American Republic is over, and he's the vice president of the United States. I mean, and he stood and he took an oath. I think he didn't faithfully take that oath. I think he unfaithfully took it. It's very clear to me that he is. I mean, we put a seditionist in the administration, in the form of JD Vance. I noticed that he passed on having the Naval Observatory be his residence, breaking tradition, probably on purpose as a fuck you to America. I mean, I think that you can draw your own conclusions. But yeah, these people are, yeah, these are not good people. They think they're smarter than you. They think they should run the world. Um, and you know, I know some of them really don't like what I'm saying. On my Substack, and probably right now. Um, so yeah, I mean, I hold out hope. I want to be clear that, that some of these people will change their minds and come to their senses. I believe in redemption. Um, but I mean, like, there's also, like, I mean, it's also the case too that, like, this is a situation which is becoming eminently more dangerous for all of us as days go by. If the Trump administration outright defies the Supreme Court order and this is allowed to stand, I think that's very dangerous. I think, yeah, I think things are going to start getting really, really dark in the coming months. And look, I mean, there is a point where I think some of these people will be beyond forgiveness, legally, morally, and ethically. At least I think that. Um, and I've had people say that I've had people accuse me of sounding very threatening when I say things like this. And I don't know why, like, they think it's threatening. I'm just stating what I view as sort of like historical fact. Like, I believe, look, I believe that some of these people should go to jail. They have obviously committed, what I can see, financial frauds. Um, they have violated federal ethics laws, uh, self-dealing laws. Like, this administration, there doesn't seem to be any like limitation on members of this administration, Donald Trump himself, on just like enriching themselves. Based on, I mean, like, there's been lots of reporting now done showing like how administration officials have actually were able to take advantage of the tariff chaos, and made lots of money on like puts and calls and all this other shit. I mean, it's like corrupt as shit, and so they don't care about you. Um, and yeah, I mean, like, and that's fraud. It's a crime against the American people. And I dare say it's treason. We can, I mean, statutorily, it might not technically be treason. I can look at what the U.S. code says, but I mean, morally, it's treason, at least. Um, if I mean, I I would impeach for treason, as a high crime, if I had my way, because yeah, it breaks faith with the purpose of that office. It isn't the the executive branch is an office of public trust. It is commanded by Article 2 of the Constitution to faithfully execute the laws. Faithfully execute the laws. Law, like to just do the honest thing. If the law says do A, do A. That's what it says. And if the law says don't do B, don't do B. That's what faithful execution of the law means. It does not mean basically adding your own opinion saying, well, I don't think A should be done. I don't think A is constitutional, so I'm just going to ignore this. That's not faithful execution of the law. I mean, if you think that, bring a fucking lawsuit. But like you can't just like break the law and and see what the courts think, right? And this administration is just breaking laws right, left, and center. They're asserting beliefs around things like the unitary executive theory, that a lot of these laws that constrain executive power, like historically, like the Pendleton Act, the Civil Service Reform Act, the Administrative Procedures Act, various other facts which govern and control, um, the administration of the civil service. I mean, these are laws that were passed by Congress. In the case of the Civil Service Reform Act, which was passed in the shadow of the Watergate, right? Um, it tried to reduce the power of the president to outright dismiss nonpartisan civil servants, right? To like avoid a repeat of the Friday Night Massacre. Modern conservative judicial theorists, and in particular, two, three. I mean, we should say three Supreme Court justices, Thomas Alito and Kavanaugh, seem to, based on like rulings they've made, opinions, dissents they've had, believe that those laws are unconstitutional, that the president cannot be constrained in those ways. I don't know like why anyone would arrive at that conclusion. That's fucking crazy. I can't imagine the founders like thinking putting anti-corruption laws on the executive branch and regulating decisions in the executive branch to limit conflicts of interest, and to limit exercises of personal power outside of law would be laws that the founders would have thought that Congress had no business passing. That's insane. But they believe that. And they want to argue that these laws and that these controls are unconstitutional. They claim that this is a expression of original intent, of the but I mean it's crazy. I mean they quote Hamilton, right, and his, he mentions in the Federalist paper about the importance of like, having energy in the executive, and they kind of read this as meaning that the other branches have to stand out of the way, right? But they don't read all the other like concerns that Hamilton has about concentrated power, like conveniently. So I mean, unitary executive theory, in my opinion, is bullshit. This idea that Congress can't create independent agencies, um, and that these are all illegal. Um, which is, this is like the argument that they're hoping to win with the Federal Reserve, right? So like technically, by law, Trump can't fire Powell, right? Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve. But the unitary executive theory people, these conservative judicial theorists, believe that that law is unconstitutional. They believe the president should be able to fire anybody for any reason at any time, including like a random FBI agent or the person that like takes your tickets at a collects your payment for entry at a national park. They believe the president can just say you're fired and you're hired, like that. And that Congress has no proper business under this unitary executive theory of interfering with that. But we had that system before. It was referred to as the spoils system. It ended after the assassination of President Garfield, and and led to a whole bunch of anti-corruption legislation, which culminated in the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act of 1873. So I mean, we've been here before. We know what happens when you let the executive have this kind of power. And that's what they claim that the founders demand of us. It's crazy. These people are crazy. They're trying to take over your country. They're trying to turn your country into a dictatorship. That's what they're trying to do. I mean, that's why they have these crazy theories. Because that's what happened. I mean, if you take this to its logical conclusion, the president can just do whatever, and like the courts and Congress can't control them because if you think about like if the president can just fire anybody, um, well, like let's say the president gives an illegal order to an FBI agent that says, "Go kill Mike Brock." The FBI agent says, "No, like I'm not. That's illegal. That's a murder." It's like, "Well, you're fired." And then goes to the next person and says, "Go kill Mike Brock, or you're fired, and I'll also pardon you for the murder, so you won't have any consequences." I mean, unitary executive theory basically says that's a cheat code. There's nothing you can do about that other than impeach the president. Um, that's batshit insane. Like the idea that like any of the founders would have thought that that's a reasonable read of Article 2 of the Constitution is so fucking insane. But you can like read like members of of the Federalist Society will read like 37-page like fucking legal theories telling you that's exactly what the Constitution says, and it's obscurantism. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. Um, and so yeah, I mean that's. Um, yeah, I mean, that's my view on that. So, anyways, I mean, I wasn't necessarily going to go very long on this one, but I'm free to take a few questions from viewers now in my last few minutes, if anybody has any comments or questions on this, anything I talked about or anything else. I'm happy to try and respond. I can also look to see what people have already said. Um, um, Mighty Bog, that's not honoring their oath. I mean, they're certainly not honoring their oath. I mean, I mean, like as I said, I mean, these are offices of public trust, and like our our founders thought and hoped that people that took these offices, as temporary custodians of these offices would have some virtue about it. But apparently none of our current leaders have any such virtue. Um, okay, got some questions. Any insight as to why Republicans are not speaking up? Like, what are they threatened with? I mean, I think it's a lot of things. I mean, Lisa Murkowski's like public words, last week were pretty revealing. I mean, like she's like clearly like afraid for her life, right? Like she was terrified and she admitted to being terrified. I've heard from people, like I still have a lot of connections on the Hill. Like I know people who are, like I know a lot of corporate lobbyists on the Hill from working in Silicon Valley over the years, and I do chat with some of them. And and I've heard pretty consistently that some of the more moderate Republicans are just like afraid that they'll be killed by like groypers or MAGA extremists if they speak up. I mean, like this is the thing. And honestly, and some journalists, and I think like Maggie Haberman, and like other people have said similar things. So I believe some of that is true. I believe some of these people are literally afraid that they'll be murdered, if they step out of line, or their families. So I mean, the Republican Party is a basically like run like a criminal gang now, right? Like, and if you know anything about criminal gangs, you know that it can be very hard to leave. Um, Leaving a gang can sometimes result in your death. Um, and these guys are gangsters. They're fucking gangsters, and so you have a lot of. I still think they should speak up. I think they're cowards. I think they should risk their lives if they love this country. I'm willing to risk my life for this country. But they're coward. They're cowards. I don't discount the possibility that they disagree, that they agree with me privately, that they wish this all wasn't happening, but they're cowards. They're cowards. That's what they are. That's how history will remember them. Um they don't think history will remember them that way. Like what they think to themselves is like, I'm being very pragmatic. I'm trying to smooth things over from the inside. I mean, this is what this is what Hindenburg did with Hitler. Worked out really well. Um, anyways, what else? What other questions do we have? Um, We got questions. Can the population impeach? Well, I mean, look, I mean, I agree with David Brooks. Like, we need to have mass protests in this country. We have to have civil disobedience in this country. Um, um, when your government doesn't represent your interests, become ungovernable. I mean, that is, um, uh, I mean, any of our founders hearing me say that, given this context, would be saying hallelujah to that. I mean, have you read the Declaration of Independence? I mean, I did. I mean, I don't know if any of you I did this read through on another Substack live where we actually read the entire Declaration of Independence, and we stopped and took notes as we went. But I mean, yeah, I mean, like, we don't, like, I mean, you don't. Yeah, I mean, like, there's a social contract, right? If the government, this is a system of self-government. All of us are equal before and under the law. This is a fundamental principle of a republic. And if that's not true, then, and if you don't benefit from the protections of law, it's hard to ethically say that you should be bound by the constraints of law in protecting yourself. I mean, that seems like ethically incoherent. And so, yeah, I mean, that calls for civil disobedience, mass civil disobedience, if that's the case. I mean, that's just social contract theory. Like, this is John Locke. Thomas Jefferson. I mean, like, this is what they said. This is like what I'm saying is what they said. This is not radical. This is basic. Like, this is basic. Standing up against tyranny. Stuff. Um, do we have any other questions here? Um, if they're that afraid, why don't they just resign? Um, I mean, because, like, well, I mean, one of the things that happens with a lot of these politicians, quite honestly, is like they don't know anything else other than politics. Um, like, I think for a lot of them, like, they don't actually have any friends who, like, aren't on the Hill, right? Like, their friends are like lobbyists and other politicians on the Hill. And so for them, like, really, like, like, a lot of these Republicans, like, this is like their community. This is their life, right? Like, their families know each other, their kids hang out together. There's deep social bonds there, and we know that, like, humans really, really struggle with, like, sacrificing those social bonds even under these conditions. So, yeah, I mean, like, I don't think that there's really much of a chance that any serious Republican will jump ship. I don't even think Lisa Murkowski will fully jump ship, unless it feels really safe for her to do so. Or if it feels like Trump, Musk, and Vance's downfall is inevitable, and MAGA's downfall is inevitable. If it doesn't seem inevitable, they won't back down. They'll just try to continually rationalize to themselves that they're trying to, like, basically, you know, limit sort of excess from the inside. But they're not doing that. They're enablers. They're effectively collaborators, whatever they say to themselves. Um, do you think we are heading for a civil war? I hear this from MAGA. I mean, I wrote about this. I actually wrote a piece about my thoughts on the risk of civil war, a few weeks ago. Yeah, I mean, it's not it's you could, I mean, look, I mean, if you want to imagine how it would happen, I'll just say, I mean, I'll tell you how I could imagine it happening, how a civil war could break out, just like with my sort of, like, political philosopher slash, political scientist hat on. Um, I mean, it would come about, I think, in a situation where, like, if the mili like, it would happen, it would happen within the military, right? It would probably be like branches of the military kind of, like, going against each other, something like that. If it happened, um, the ways in which I think it could come about would be the president trying to order the military to, um, like, crack down on mass protests, sort of like become personal enforcers for the president and some large contingent of the military. Um, basically like saying no, but some other part of the military being willing to go along. You know, like I mean, I get the sense from like what I read in like polls in the Military Times and stuff that like the Air Force is like very pro MAGA. Whereas I feel like the US Army is like not. And so you can imagine like the Air Force and Army kind of like, being on different sides of that. Those are the like really scary cleavages for me. Um, I don't know how to put like a probability on that, but there's dangers there if this goes on for another 2, 3 years and the Trump administration goes to work sort of trying to like build, you know, um, a politically loyal column within the Pentagon, that could that could lead to a fifth column in the Pentagon sort of emerging against it, and that could lead to civil war. That could lead to U.S. military shooting at U.S. military. Um, um, I mean, that's scary. It's very scary. And but that's the game that these motherfuckers in the White House are choosing to play. Which puts us all in grave risk. And not and I mean if the US were to fall into civil war, it's like, you have to worry, would China try to invade us at that time? Like take advantage of our weakness to dominate? There's like it's really insane now that we actually have to think about these things as plausible scenarios in the coming years if we don't do something about this. Um, like I'm not saying that's likely to happen, but if people are asking me like what I think, like how that could come about, I think it could look something like that. Um, um, do you think Republicans always wanted this type of authoritarian? No, no. I mean, I think that I think that we had a pretty sane 20 years, right? In the Republican and Democratic Party from like, in the 80s and 90s. Um, like Reagan was, we can like nitpick with it, but like Reagan was a pretty sane president. Clinton was a pretty sane president. Um, uh, I don't think George W. Bush was an insane president, but I mean, obviously um, the excess after September 11th, in terms of like, the national security state, mass surveillance, like all these things, stuff that we learned about later on, like NSA, like basically intercepting like all of our fucking emails and Google and stuff like that the Snowden leaks like revealed. That was all like, that's pretty authoritarian stuff. I mean, I don't think Bush is actually an authoritarian, but I do think that administration, the Iraq War, like obviously it was like a fucking disaster. Um, but no, I don't think the Republican Party like always wanted authoritarianism. I think both parties were generally like small L liberal for most of the 20th century in some form. The Republicans were obviously more corporatist, and the Democrats were more willing to sort of entertain labor as like part of the conversation. Um, but like they were still like playing in the same like general like big small L liberal ballpark, and that started to change after the Tea Party, right, started to um you know uh like challenge the establishment of the Republican Party, right, and they chased like Boehner out as speaker, right, like during the Obama administration when he was actually trying to be quite reasonable and reach a grand bargain with Obama, which looked like it would have been a pretty reasonable legislation, whereas the Republicans would have gotten something and the Democrats would have gotten something, but the Tea Party was having none of that. They wanted apparently to an authoritarian state in the end, and they set about like engaging in obstruction and putting in place um, judges that would buy into expansive views of executive power. Um, they despite the fact that you know John Roberts, and look, I'm glad John Roberts is there rather than not there right now, like given the because he's an institutionalist. But it does have to be said that like Roberts has been in the majority for a whole series of decisions of this conservative majority that has continuously weakened protections for American citizens accused of crimes, American citizens who come into contact with law enforcement. Um, this court has continuously weakened protections of criminal defendants. They've made it harder to appeal convictions in the appellate courts. Um, they've made it harder to appeal uh, the death penalty. Um, like they literally narrowed due process. Um, they've made it easier for police to act with impunity, qualified immunity being like the greatest example of this. Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's been a court that's been playing footsie with authoritarianism, with giving the state more and more and more power to kill you. Like literally. And like a great guy who's written a lot about this is like Radley Balco. He wrote a book like Rise of the Warrior Cop like about 10 years ago that like talks a little bit about like some of this. So, this court is, I mean, um, yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's been an authoritarian drift in this party like over the last like 10 to 15 years, and that's just like true. Um, Anyways, I'm gonna like wrap for today. But yeah, I'm gonna try. I mean, I know I haven't done this like in over a week. I'm gonna like, I'll try and do them every day if I can find some time, in the evening. But anyways, thank you everybody. We got quite a few viewers here live, even though I didn't pre-announce this. And I'll put the recording up for people who weren't able to view live. So thanks everybody, and I'll see you soon.